what I'm going to do, y'all can see my screen here. So I initially, I'm still learning. I initially recorded this yesterday, and I did a stream for it, and I was going to walk y'all through the composition, and then when I printed out the video, I didn't have all the settings correct, and some of the audio was getting out of sync with the video because I recorded the audio at a different sample rate than Logic was recording my microphone, and it was just too much of a hassle to go in and resync. If you guys have ever dealt in any kind of film, like compose anything for a film, like a school project or something, you guys know that sync issues can kind of be a pain to figure out. And so that sucks. So for this one, I'm just going to kind of retroactively go through my thought process for composing this. I try to keep it simple. I didn't want to do anything too fancy. You could spend, another 10 hours on this if you wanted to, or if I wanted to. I'm just dialing this in. So, so I'm going to play it for you real quick. It's super short. All right. So, super short. This took me maybe an hour to do when I recorded the video. I think Sunday night I actually recorded it. But I'm going to just walk through it, just track by track, kind of how I composed it. Y'all do not have a lot of these plugins, but the reality is I don't have a lot of the default Logic plugins installed because it's like 20 gigs of storage that I don't want to keep on my computer because I just don't use them. But the concept is the same. Drums are drums, instruments are instruments. So that should not matter. So first drum track, Armageddon Drums. All right, so this is a pretty cool library. It's called Damage. It's by, I forget who does it actually. Let me see if I can. Heavyocity, I think, is who does it. Now I think about it. Super cool plugin. It's got a lot of nasty drum kits in here. And so this is the first thing I put in, just thinking drum loop. I EQ'd out a lot of the low end. And I will show y'all why I did that in just a second. I need to get down to the track that made me make that decision. So next, I added in what's called a plastic ensemble, also heavyocity. Actually, I kind of want to take out a little bit of low end too. All right. All right, so this guy is a loop. The reason that actually, I'll just play that loop for you. So. All right. So the reason I took out some of the low end on these guys is because I liked the low end on this loop. That's weird. And so if I throw this back in and take out the EQ, I just felt that it was cleaner, and so that's what I ended up doing. I've talked to y'all about this before, but I don't know, it's a pet peeve, but I don't really like a messy low end in mixes, and the tendency is to allow too many things to be going on in the low end. And so I think, taking out this, it just helps a little bit. Okay, and then I added in one more loop. It was just kind of high end. So it's not super audible, but it's definitely adding a little bit of like just high frequency drum loop, which I like. This actually I used another Heaviosity plugin. Got some cool stuff in here. As far as editing on the drums are concerned, so I recorded these in. And if you watch, when I quantize, you'll see them move a little bit. So there's a function in Logic called Humanize, which I love to use for drums. Basically what it does, so you go to select all, functions, MIDI transform, Humanize, not reverse position. I'm just changing here. Basically, you are randomizing certain parameters of these MIDI events. And the thought behind that is no one plays drums perfectly in time. Like 0 people. There's always little things that are not in time, little discrepancies that cause drums, and really all instruments, but in this context, cause drums to feel human. If you were to go in this and just hit Command-All-Q and perfectly quantize it, that's going to sound, once you start adding tons of things on top of that are all perfect, it starts to sound fake and not real. So what I love to do is come in here to the Humanize function, and you can randomize certain things like position, velocity, and length. Position is just where the note starts, velocity is the velocity of the MIDI event, and the length is the actual length of it. I don't want to humanize velocity or length because that doesn't really affect anything with drums. Well, velocity does, but I'm happy with the way I put it in. So select all. I want to randomize the position. Select and operate. You'll see them move around a little bit. You're not probably going to be able to hear that. The way you would really hear it is if you start listening to drums on top of each other. I'll do the same thing here. Command 4. It already is kind of humanized, actually. So you can hear certain, what you can call like flams, which a flam is basically where, in the drumming world is where 2 notes, you like hit the drums like a tika, like you, I don't know how to, how to do it, if that makes sense. Like one comes right after the other. And so if you listen to that concept with 2 drums playing on top of each other, you can hear where some of the drums don't completely hit, and it kind of adds this flam sound. If you over-exaggerate this, it's going to sound bad. But a tiny little flam creates a fatter drum sound and a more human drum sound because no 2 people would play perfectly in time together. That being said, with loops, this loop is just one piece of information and I held down a note. So you would want to make sure that the beginning of this is quantized perfectly, because if you humanize this, the rest of the loop is going to be slightly off based off of how much the beginning was slightly off. So loops, you need them to be perfectly quantized. But that's another reason why I'm not a huge fan of using loops, too many of them, because they're all perfectly made, and I just don't like that. And so all right. So in the original video, I'd spent like a good 20 minutes building this out. But so that I am kind of considering my first layer, which is the drum layer. Maybe even including, I'll include these 2. So I put in 2 swells. And so the way I did that was, in Logic, I did that by hitting H. There's a hide feature. So I actually recorded in the swell as MIDI information, and then I hit Control B and bounce that in place. That then spits out this track, and then I go in and hide the MIDI track. The reason I do that is sometimes with swells, it's hard to know where the peak of the swell is in MIDI world, and I don't like fidgeting with it. So I'll actually come in and just bounce it, and then I'll line up, and actually it's a little off here. I didn't do that well. I'll line up the kind of peak of the swell with the downbeat of the bar, which is really what you want. And so, trying to click on. So you can kind of hear the peak is on the downbeat of bar 5. Yeah, sorry, someone's trying to give me a gift card, and I like gift cards. So, yeah, that's what I did with those. I usually bounce these in place, and then I'll add effects and stuff. Again, I'm rolling out a lot of low end on this, especially on the arrow swoosh, because I didn't like the original. Just not a fan of that. Same thing with suspended cymbal roll. You got to be careful with suspended cymbal rolls. They get very bright if you're not careful. That would overwhelm a mix. And the way I think about swells, just for context, sometimes I'll have them in because I really want to hear them, but more times than not, they're there to kind of subtly create momentum and to drive or propel the music into the next section. So in the context, listen to how it kind of pushes the music into bar 5. Actually, I could use a little bit more of that, actually. That's not too loud. So I also think it's worth noting at this point, look at my levels and look at the master fader throughout this whole thing. All right, right, so I'm clipping a little bit, which is okay to clip a tiny bit. I won't get into the specifics of it, but in digital world, just because you're clipping here doesn't mean you're actually clipping the output. There's some what's called floating bit that I just honestly I don't want to get into it, and I also couldn't explain it well. But you're not necessarily distorting because you're hitting red here. The point I'm making is healthy gain staging, and gain staging is basically just how volume flows through your circuit and through your chain of plugins and faders. That is important. And so I could easily have everything cranked up here and just like that's the, and that, I mean, it's distorting in my headphones, not because of this, but just because the headphones can only take so much volume. But it's good practice to get into the habit. When I was composing this originally, I kept coming back and, like, as I added more stuff, turning the drums down. So when you're composing, you want to be shooting for around kind of zero, not this zero, but unity, which in here is, I guess, negative 12. I forget what gain logic uses, but yeah, you want to keep it at 0 or close to it. And so then towards the end, once I have everything at a good healthy level, that's when you can go in and add in plugins to make everything louder. It is a fact that loud music, more times than not, I say it's a fact. It's a fact that sometimes this is true, that louder music sounds and feels better. And that's really just the way we perceive sound, and also just the way like physical waveforms hit our body. Like if you've ever been to a club or gone to a concert where the bass is like just cranked, like that feels good. Like it's actually hitting your chest and like vibrating your rib cage. Like that feels good. And so we associate louder music more times than not with good. That's not always the case. And so a lot of times when I'm mixing, I'll turn down like my master output to a really quiet volume and like really listen and go, hey, can I hear, is there anything sticking out at this low volume? I don't know where y'all are at in the curriculum track or degree plan of doing like audio physics, but a brief summary, if you don't know, waveforms are created differently. So lower notes are wider and longer waveforms, where higher frequencies are shorter. That's why if you were to move away from a sound source, the high frequencies would be the first ones to go, but you would hear the low frequencies for a long, long time. And there's a whole audio physics thing, but low frequencies very long, high frequencies very short. That being said, because sound is there's actually physics there. The louder you turn up music, certain frequencies are hitting you differently than other frequencies. And so that's why it's important. Like you might have the volume cranked and go, man, like this bass feels so good. And then you turn it down and it's like, wait, the bass is way too loud. That's all I can hear. And so you turn it back up and bring the bass down and go, oh, this is nice. So that's an extremely helpful thing to get in the habit of, is mixing at quieter volumes, monitoring your gain staging. It's extremely important. I was not doing this in college. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I really started to understand how important this really was. And so please take my word for it. It is an extremely helpful habit to get into. So, all right, after I got the drum layer down, I added a little bass in. All right, so just so y'all know, the chords are C minor, A flat major, F minor, D minor. I am using the mother of all synthesizers, which is Omnisphere. It has got a bajillion things in here. But basically what I did, I found this sound. I went and added an arpeggiator on it. So without the arpeggiator, it's kind of boring. I wouldn't say it's boring, but... So I added that on. Set the 16ths. Kind of shortened them up a little bit. You can have them longer, but I like that. I like being able to hear the attack. So I did that, and then I came in here and added one of my favorite plugins. It's actually an effect rack, and you can add in different things. So let's turn these off. So the first thing I did was add a distortion to it, which is Decapitator. Woo. I still love that. You can cut out some frequencies too if you wanted to, where only some of it's hitting the distortion. I just left it all in. And then I added in a sweeping filter. I love bass, especially bass, kind of what I would consider a bass drone, or so. I love having some movement on it, and so one of my favorite ways to accomplish that is by adding a moving filter. And so that's what it is without. And I don't have it all the way mixed in, but that would be completely mixed. So I just have about half of it in. You can hear that with everything in too. Like it almost feels like the bass is like descending into the next bar. It's set here to 2 bars. So that is what I did for bass. I haven't even EQ'd that, so let me think about EQing. So good rule of thumb, the big thing that bass is always going to be conflicting with in the frequency spectrum is the kick drum. And so listening to this loop, which is where the low end is, I can see that this kick drum is kind of living down here. Right here. So I want to accentuate that. So I want to carve out some space in the bass frequency for that to live. And then I want to do the flip for the bass. So I want to carve out some room in the kick for the bass to live. And so I'm going to do that here. Actually, I kind of want to add on one more thing. So, I don't know why it's doing that. So weird. There we go. All right, cool. That feels good to me. You don't. So with a lot of these, plugins that get pre-recorded, a lot of the times when they produce them, they're already EQing out unwanted frequencies. It would be different if you're recording an actual bass. And so on a lot of these plugins, what you're EQing mainly for is to carve out space, to create some separation or room from other instruments. Kick and bass is a common one. And honestly, if I took my headphones off and did this over other speakers, I might change the frequencies here. But this is usually a good rule of thumb for bass and kick. You're carving out space. You're doing the same thing with guitar and vocals. You're going to carve out some space in the guitar for the vocal to sit, and vice versa. You're going to find a frequency range for the vocal to kind of sit and carve out room in the guitar. So if you have any questions, again, on any of this stuff that I've talked about so far, hit me up offline. We can get on a call and talk about it more or answer emails. All right, so that is 2 loops in my mind. So I'm thinking so far we get drum loop. This Armageddon thing will work. I upgraded to Catalina this weekend, and that was a big mistake because things are not working like they're supposed to. And the reason I upgraded, sorry, I'm distracted now. The reason I upgraded was because you can now use your iPad as a, in my case, third monitor, and it's like beautiful, crystal clear, looks so good. And because I wanted that so badly, I didn't do my homework on upgrading, even though Catalina came out like a year ago at this point. When in the audio world, never upgrade without doing your research. That's all I'm going to say, because this is a mistake. Okay, and then second layer would be bass. So kind of imagine like layer 1, second layer. All right, so I then added this on top. So I'm doing another Omnisphere plugin. This is the setting. They spelled anticipation wrong. Put an arpeggiator on it. And then I added some plugins. I'll kind of walk through. Again, cutting out low end. I added a little reverb on it. Not a lot. Just a little bit. And then I added this plugin. It's one of my favorite plugins. It's called Portal. You can kind of hear it doing a little work. It's pretty dope. It's pretty sick. Honestly, I don't even know if you can hear that in the mix, but it's cool enough that I love it. And then I added the effect track onto it, which is basically probably some distortion. You can't really hear it. I've kind of got the dry wet knob down a little bit. Even when I crank it, it's kind of hard to hear, but it's adding a little bit of crunch to it, but not a lot. And then the filter free, honestly, I'm using the same setting as on the bass. Kind of got halfway mixed, dry wet. All right, so I'm thinking of that as part of layer 3, and then I've got this pits in here. And actually, it's not just the pits. I threw a ricochet, which I think that's when this does the bouncy thing, like I think. I'm not a string player. And then the Bartok pits, which is where they snap the string. So the pits is kind of hard to hear. You'd probably hear it here. If we're like in layer 3, you can still hear the pits. But as you start adding on other layers, you're probably going to lose it. I didn't really EQ much of it. I got to take another phone. All right. Okay. Oops. Show recording monitor. Okay. All right. So after the pits, I've got a string ostinato in here. All right, so sometimes I'll detune. I've got 2 string patches going on here. Sometimes I'll detune one a little bit just to add a little bit of dissonance to it. So the other thing I had to do on this one, I felt like it was dragging a little bit, and so I moved every note forward just a little bit. With the click. That's on. Just feels a little bit behind to me, so I moved it over just a little bit. That feels a little bit more on the beat. That's just a pet. I mean, that's just me being picky. That wouldn't have really come out in the final mix, but EQ'd a little bit of low end out. Again, not super necessary, but you know, they record these string libraries in a way where, any unwanted noise, they probably already filtered out, but I just do that out of habit. All right, so that's the next, I guess 1, 2, 3, layer 4. Layer 4, I've got this fat pad on. All right, so I'll take the effects off. Actually, fun fact, I use this pad on a lot of stuff. I actually love it. It's just really dense. So the first thing I do, I don't, want all that low end, so I EQ'd out some low end. And you can hear that. And honestly, I guess maybe good rule of thumb. So I'm gonna leave bass and Computer Freak going. I'm gonna toggle this on and off. Kind of a rule of thumb I go by, if you don't notice a change, just leave it, because in reality, this information is still happening. You can kind of hear it. Maybe that's because I'm just looking at it and watching it happen, and it's a placebo effect on my ears. But if you can't hear it, you might as well leave it out, because this information, it is happening. And just the way EQ works is if you have enough stuff sitting in that area, it's going to get muddy. And so even if it barely on a small level helps, certain things come out more transparently, then just leave it out. And so that's kind of where I landed on, was that. And I would just kind of move it up until I heard the bass come out. All right, so that's, I then added a reverb to it. which that's not even that long. Yeah, there we go. You can kind of hear it decay after. Pre-delay, just if y'all don't know. Mix, this is just your dry wet knob. Pre-delay, that's basically the amount of time from when the sound hits the reverb to when the reverb actually starts sounding. In this case, it's 0.8 milliseconds. So it means for the first 0.8 milliseconds, something sounds, there's no reverb on it, and then the reverb starts. A lot of people, you can use this in a way of setting distance between you and an audience. So imagine if you are in a recital hall, but you're standing right next to the performer. You're going to hear the sound before you start to hear the reverb coming back. And so they'll use pre-delay to be extreme. I mean, you can hear how longer the decay goes on because the pre-delay is so long. You do this. So, decay, just how long it decays, 1.2 seconds. It's a very small room, even though I have the large room setting, which is weird. High cut, this is just what frequencies it's cutting off. And high cut, just so y'all know, well, hold on. Yeah, so I always get confused, even after doing this for 10 years. High cut and low pass. So high cut is basically doing this. That is essentially all the way down here on the reverb, not on the actual computer freak, but on the reverb. It's not allowing anything above that to go through the reverb. Or that the whole thing is getting through. Typically on a reverb, and this is not by any means a rule of thumb, but a lot of times on a reverb, you'll see kind of an EQ like this. You don't want a lot of low end or a lot of really shrill EQ frequencies come through a reverb. So a lot of times you'll see something like that. All right. After the reverb, I added in my favorite effect rack. Just added in this crystallizer. So dope. So basically what it's doing is it is taking, so a 1200 cents is 1 octave. So it's taking the information, reprocessing up an octave up, and then it's doing just some funky stuff that I don't want to begin to explain, but there's so many I love this plugin. There's so many different things you can do. I love the original, like the crystal stuff, because it's basically adding this high octave up frequency thing. So you kind of hear it to start coming in. And so now you've got this like almost second pad on top of the original pad. So cool. It's so rad. I love that. I want to do a little bit of that. All right. And then Shimmer. Shimmer is another type of reverb. It's a little more special effecty. So it's just adding in that, they call it Shimmer because it's like very high-end reverby. And so I'm just adding a little bit of high-end on that. I'll do this a lot of times if I feel like I'm missing just some top end of the spectrum stuff. I love to hear kind of artifacts and remnants of high-frequency pads in my mixes without it. So So it just adds a little bit of like breath at the top of the mix, which I like. That's just preference. So yeah, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers now, and then you gotta have a melody, right? That's actually not true. You don't always have to have a melody, but I wanted a melody because that's what I wanted for this. So French horn. Side ordering Chipotle for lunch. I had a free meal, which is awesome. So I just got free Chipotle, which is dope. Okay, so that's all 5 layers. I added, or I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. I added a little reverb on the French horn. Just because it makes it a little bit fatter. So this is a very basic composition. I could spend 10, 20 hours working on this, just adding in a little bit more percussion stuff, like fine-tuning some of the French horn, note transitions. There's some kind of weird legato stuff happening I don't like. But for the sake of this, this is just a start. This is a very easy thing to do in an hour, is to build something kind of simple like this. And so what I will say, the one thing, I'm not saying that my music is better than y'all's, but that also is, I guess, kind of true. But the thing about this that I think is different than a lot of what y'all have composed in class, and again, this is not right or wrong, it's simple. Harmonic content is very straightforward. There's not a lot of low-end muddy stuff. Y'all kind of have it, and not everyone, but I see this a lot in not just y'all, but the other times I've taught this class. I'll see stuff like this. So we'll do... So I'll see that. By the way, there's a lag here that I'm still figuring out. Let me. Here we go. Sorry. So, and then y'all will kind of come in, add another track. Let's just say it's bass, and y'all do something like this. You know, y'all do something kind of like that. Oh, I messed up there. And then y'all go in and add another instrument and another instrument, all doing kind of similar things, and it just gets really muddy and messy, and my ears are just kind of like, wait, what am I listening to? What should I be listening for? Where this, you know, kind of thing I've done, there's pad, there's some plucking, there's some like ostinato stuff, but everything is built around this eventually being the melody. You know, without it... like nothing's really fighting for your attention. I mean, really, the one thing that sticks out to me as like the melody is the moving pluck. So, Like that filter moving is what I hear the most of. And so that's just, some feedback on, what kind of makes this different than some of the stuff y'all have sent me so far. Which, again, everything y'all have sent me is great. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's definitely a time and place for more intricately complex stuff. But there's a right way to do it. So if anything, just take note of how simple and concise this is. You got drums, you got a swell, bass, some mid-range plucks or arpeggios, an ostinato, and then the melody. There's a lot of good music that you can make with just keeping it simple and mixing it and producing it well. And so if I had another 10 hours to work on this, it'd probably sound dope, I think. Or maybe not. Who knows? Not everyone likes me or my music. So that's fine. All right, so I already took the liberty of bouncing these out because I'd already gone through this exercise once. So what I'm going to do now is FMOD. I do think, I did mention this at the beginning, y'all need to download FMOD on y'all's computers. So if you just go to, see my Chipotle? Oh yeah. If you go to fmod.com, let's see, download, and then you want to download FMOD. If this thing loads, come on. Well, I'd say let's get to know each other real quick, but this is asynchronous, so. Yeah, I need to finish this before 12:08. Oh, so you need to create an account. That makes sense. And then you're downloading FMOD Studio. Yeah, so FMOD Studio. I don't have a problem with y'all downloading this. I don't know enough about it, though, to... Yeah, that's fine. So go ahead and download that. It is free. The way FMOD makes their money is if you are a game developer and you ship a certain amount of products or plan to, you have to pay a licensing fee, which is an awesome way to have it set up. So you can come in here, use this for free, learn the system. The only thing that would make it a pay-to-use thing would be if the game developer you're working with, it's a big game or even a small game that has however many amount of releases. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to create what's called a new 2D event. I'll leave it called that. And then I'm going to add some audio tracks. Excuse me. And then what I want to do, I put this on the desktop. No, I didn't. I put it on this. All right. So I got layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, then layer 6. I'll delete these. Now, the way I recorded these, we've talked about this before, you can bounce these as different things. You can bounce them as one, as a layer, and then the second layer has everything the first layer had in it, and then what's in the second layer, or you can bounce it as each layer individually. I bounced it as individual layers, which is my preference because it gives you a little bit of mixing capability in here. You can actually go in and go, oh, the French horn's just a little bit too loud. So there's still some flexibility to mix in here as well. If you bounce it out with other layers inside your layer, you lose a little bit of that flexibility. And so I'm going to add a parameter. Let's call it waves, which I'm thinking, which would just be, let's like boss waves or whatever waves. Waves of enemies. I can't think clearly because I'm hungry. Okay, so, I want to get rid of that too. I don't know why that's there. Something's wrong. Did I just break something? Oh, that's what it was. Let me layer these, or label these correctly because it's going to drive me crazy. Layer 1. Layer 2. layer 4, layer 5, and then layer 6. So this is basically the same thing as Logic. It's the same exact mix. So what I'm going to do in here is we're going to create automation points. And we are going to bring all the layers down except for the first one. Okay, actually, let's bring this down too. Okay, cool. So now, even though the music is playing and it is being looped, you can't hear it. So this could be, you know, any scenario. The music is running, but you haven't triggered a new parameter yet, so the music's just running in the background, you can't hear it, and it's ready to go at any point. And then, let's say the parameter is 10. So nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. And then enemies are starting to come. Okay, and then I want to add in a all right. So say you beat the first wave, the second wave starts coming in. Again, you can go all, I mean, you know. And let's say you beat the second wave and something, you have it set up a certain way and it's just, it goes away. You know, you can do that too. Layer 3. So here's another way you could do it. Just as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about it. You could have this beginning layer that didn't have anything. You could have, let's see, this is the French horn. This is the computer freak. Let's do this. I don't like that. Let's do this. So you could have that, which is kind of rad. And then I'd have to fix that, so I'd want it to come out here. It's a little sloppy, but a big thing is making sure that the transitions between different parameters, or the way these layers kind of come in, making sure it's seamless. So the solution would be to do it this way. So finding like the bottom. So drum Cs are coming way quicker. you can add a layer here where all right, so hold on. So if we go back here, get these playing. So that could be a cool way to like end out the parameter, and then once the boss fights or whatever this parameter is, once it's done, you know, you can program that however you want. So yeah, that, I mean, this is a very, 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 very simple implementation of FMOD, but hopefully y'all kind of get the idea of, you know, what we're going for. And so, yeah, you know, when you're composing in Logic, when you're composing this, be thinking about how it gets implemented. You know, this, if I was on the timeline here, hide these. You know, at any point, so yeah, tons of ways for you to do that. What? Let me add this into here.